it looks like with all the tools coming out now, the amount of product in movies or anything else will exponentially rise. I mean, the way how easy it is to create more complex things nowadays is just amazing. So we will see a lot of variations there of very similar things probably coming up.
Hi, I'm Boaz, founder and CEO of Augmented AI Labs, and I'm excited that you're tuning in to the Shift AI podcast, a show that explores what it takes to thrive and adapt to the changing workplace in the digital age of remote work and AI. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Matthias Wittmann as our guest. As a leading expert in digital humans and visual effects at Digital Domain, Matthias has been at the forefront of merging AI with entertainment and technology. From his groundbreaking work like Benjamin Button to pioneering autonomous virtual humans, he brings unique insights into how AI is transforming Hollywood and beyond. If you're interested in the future of digital humans, AI and entertainment, or the intersection of visual effects and artificial intelligence, you are not going to want to miss this episode. We also want to send out a special thank you to Augmented AI Labs for sponsoring this episode. This is going to be a great show, and we're super excited to talk to Matthias today and learn more about the cutting-edge work happening at Digital Domain. Let's get to it. All right, Matthias, thank you for joining us on the Shift AI podcast today. Excited to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
So today's show is going to be focused on all the interesting AI and ML stuff that's happening in Hollywood. We haven't talked to a lot of people that are doing this in the film business, so I've really been looking forward to talking to you today. But before we get started, can you talk a little bit just about your background, how you got to Digital Domain in the first place, and just a little bit about your story and history?
So I studied film in Germany, in Ludwigsburg, and I always wanted to be director or something like this, and wanted to work in Hollywood movies. And then I figured, I'm actually a pretty good animator. So this school had a branch for animation, and I figured, wow, that works really good. And they had really good equipment. We could work on Silicon Graphics workstations. At the time in the 90s, that was really unheard of. So no one had stuff like this at home. The PCs were not that fast. You couldn't do stuff at home. So it was a really great opportunity. But we had to learn everything ourselves. So using Softimage or Power Animator from Alias, that was really something, it is installed, it is there, you can use it. We don't tell you how, but here it is. And so very early on, I had to learn dealing with new stuff and new software or software at all and figuring out how things work. I came from stop motion actually, and then did this computer stuff. And while I was studying, I really wanted to do something like just real Hollywood things, and only working on movies. And in Germany, there was not really at the time the place for working on stuff like that. So I was trying to get connections to Hollywood, if you want. Yeah. And one of the peoples I had contacts to were at Digital Domain. And at some point when Digital Domain decided to go more into character animation or do all this stuff with character animation, they asked me if I want to come over. And so in 2004, I moved over and worked on iRobot. And from that point on, I kind of stayed at Digital Domain and made my way there through the animation department, then became specialist on facial animation with Benjamin Button. During my studies, I already looked into the effects system. So the stuff, how you make actually real facial, how you can make more modern facial rigs, at the time more modern. And I learned a lot of the details, how human face is working, how human emotions and facial performance are working. And during Button, I became the expert at DD for stuff like this. So from that point on, I scanned also a lot of people going through all these poses and all these things because I knew it really very well. I worked on a couple of movies with facial animation. Obviously, I don't know if you know, but for Benjamin Button, we got an Oscar. Then shortly after, we worked on Tron. And Tron was not very well received. So Tron Legacy. And we got really, in certain areas, bad reviews for how bad the facial looks like. And that shows you, it can quickly change. You think you know how something is working, but it is not always working the same way. You can say this almost in any kind of technology. And you certainly can do this also with AI. In many aspects, we can get to this then later. But you learn very early on that just because you did it once really very well, doesn't mean it will work the next time as well. Like certain factors change and suddenly it's different.
Just for the audience sake, I know that people know about James Cameron, but in 1993, he started Digital Domain. And I think most people know about the Titanic and, and other movies like that. But can you give just a little bit of background for folks that don't know about Digital Domain, what you guys are doing and what you guys are really known for?
So Digital Domain was founded by Stan Winston, Scott Ross, and James Cameron, indeed, because of Titanic, actually. So he had a little bit better control than over what's exactly going on, how to do stuff. All of the founders are left at some point, and DD was then still there doing visual effects. And Digital Domain was always known for actually creating new technology and being very much at the forefront of very high-end visuals and really good rendering and really good compositing and all those things. And for example, there's one software out there, Nuke. Everybody's using Nuke in the film industry for compositing. That was actually invented and developed at Digital Domain, and at some point just handed over to the foundry so they would resell it, because Digital Domain is not really a software house. So they just wrote it because they needed something that is really good for compositing. So this is kind of how DD is ticking.
That's super interesting. What really struck me about what you guys are doing now is some of the avatar work that you're doing. And along those lines, that autonomous virtual human work, the AI powered character stuff, I think there's a lot of people in the AI space that are intrigued by some of that. We're seeing some very interesting things coming out with Runway and people being able to mimic facial expressions and give speeches and do other kinds of AI generated video content. And I know we're very early, kind of at the forefront, but it's very exciting. So can you talk about some of the ML and AI stuff that you've been involved in and the Digital Domain has been involved in?
So there are couple of aspects with machine learning and AI, and so that we are looking into and using at Digital Domain. So we fairly early on actually looked into machine learning for improving our facial capture systems. So it really came facial capture systems and also our facial rigging systems. So it was more about how can we actually improve the results of what we're using on stage when we have these pictures of people with head-mounted cameras, and they are in motion capture, and they have all these dots on the face. And sometimes you see results of this somewhere, which is, it's quite nice, but not really so good. And we developed a system at some point that was heavily machine learned based. It's called Masquerade. And it was just not literally going one-to-one by taking these dots and putting them one-to-one onto a rig, but more analyzing much more deeper what's exactly going on in the face and transferring this into a final facial animation, which was much more human-like. So, for example, a good example is always Thanos in Avengers. So the parts we made there, they're very, very close up on him, very, very fine detail of motion and very nice translation of the actual acting onto the character. And that is only possible with really, really modern machine-based capture systems. How
about the autonomous human stuff that you guys are doing with Zoe? I mean, I've been told that I think at first maybe you were doing it because you were trying to recreate extras in your movies. Is that why? And then now it's kind of turning into this thing you can use in games. And now I see people using it in the business world. So tell me more about that.
It is kind of funny because it was not created for extras, actually. That is a real side branch we just started at some point. Also founded a digital human group within Digital Domain because we do so many digital humans. We thought, we should concentrate a little bit on it. And part of it, and I joined a little bit later, actually. In the beginning, I was just interested in real time. And after certain shows like Maleficent and so, I thought, let's look into Unreal. Let's see what you can do in real time in virtual reality. And I took some assets just for testing into Unreal and see, can you make actually really high-end looking humans in virtual reality, not what you see in games and demos that all looks creepy. So I put it inside, I know how these things are working, making a nice eye deformation for looking directions and making react on me when I go there in Unreal. And I thought, wow, that is really super interesting. It feels so real. They're not even talking to me. They're just looking at me and following me when I go around. Not like these, still the demos you see most of the time, they are, it's really not comparable to what we tried out there at the time. And at some point I just thought, but the industry thought no one needs it. So we had to put it a little bit aside. No one is using VR. AR is not far enough. So let's put it aside. I still looked into it longer and tried to make reactive people. But at some point I figured I would like to have them talk to me actually, but I couldn't because I was not smart enough. I'm just an animator, quite technical animator. I can put stuff together in Unreal, but I don't know how to make machine learned systems. And so I tried to convince someone, can't we do this here? And at some point they called me back and said, yeah, okay, you know what? We want to try this. We want to do something autonomous. So let's get you into the digital human group and make something there. This was the start for AVH, for our Zoe and for our autonomous humans.
So what's Digital Human Group doing now? And as you think about all these demos that we're seeing on AI video and people recreating themselves talking and, all of this avatar work that's happening, can you kind of, from your perspective, and from the group's perspective, from the Digital Human Group, like what are you guys thinking and what are you excited about?
So the Digital Human Group is serving the feature department and stuff like autonomous humans. So there's still this whole part of how can we get better animation from capture? How can we render better? How can we do better deformations and all those kind of things? For AVH, for autonomous virtual human, we branch off of this a little bit. It's still within the Digital Human Group, but it's a sector in it where we see how can we first of all, make it more efficient so it runs actually fast in real-time engines. How can we make it actually react? And there's the point. What you most of the time see people doing when they do the digital likeness of themselves or whatnot, it is not autonomous really. It is usually something where, oh, I made myself. Oh, look, I can control it. Oh, I see something. The character says something. Great. Good for you. It's not autonomous though. And the step to autonomous motion and reaction is quite a large one. It's not that simple.
And the latency is hard too, isn't it?
Jesus, yeah. So the latency part, it's interesting because a lot of the steps that happen in there are fairly quickly processed. I mean, imagine there's a lot of stuff going on. You talk to the autonomous human, their voice has to be created into text. The text has to be sent to a bot. The bot is creating an answer. The answer is being analyzed by sentiment. The answer is also being converted into audio by another process. The audio is going back to the facial animation system, trying to make sense of it and creating the correct facial animation. Now you have audio, facial animation, and then the whole thing has to go into the body as well, doing the correct body animation as well, figuring out what sentiment was happening. And then everything is being sent back and played back. Now, on top of that, you also have to figure out when to actually reply. Because if someone is talking, you understand if I make a rhetorical break or if I want to actually have an answer. So if I make a rhetorical break, the system usually doesn't know. So you have to give the system a certain time to understand, oh, okay, the user's done, let's answer. And right now it is like this, you wait, okay, let's answer, let's process everything. And fairly quickly, you get actually the animation. But the waiting time for figuring out, is it me now? Shall I? That is actually the part that is the biggest latency of everything.
I assume it's getting better and faster over time, but it's still not supernatural. Are we still kind of waiting for that?
I'm still waiting for it, that's for sure. I know there are systems that are looking a little bit more into this, and we definitely will focus on that much more in the coming months and years. And so where you take a model that is analyzing while you're speaking what you're actually speaking about, and is it already worth replying on it or formulating an answer while you're speaking. So it is already ready the moment you need it. So the moment you figure out, oh, that topic got to a point where I think I can answer, let's answer right away. And it might lead to the AVH interrupting you.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And now, what is the stack that you guys are using? You guys are working with AWS on this. You're using some different foundation models.
The good thing is that from beginning on, we designed this whole system very modular. So we are, for example, even though we experimented with synthesizing voice, we figured, oh, there are better companies out there. So let's make our part where we generate the voice so modular that we can just plug in another vendor. And this is then producing the voice for us. The same we do with the bots, because we don't have to develop a nice bot. There are companies that are doing this. So there you go. And it's every of this speech to text, text to speech. But the animation part, we do ourselves. Now, AWS, for example, They have their own voices, for example. They have Polly. That is one of those voices they have. We can switch to Polly if we want to, and we quite often do. We can also use other voices from other companies, and it is really, for us, more depending on what does the client actually want to use. And obviously, if you do a demo with AWS for them, and so we use Bedrock as the large language model, the Bedrock Titan, for example, and then we use Polly for the voices, and then they have their own text-to-speech system and speech-to-text, system. And so this is how that works.
And so, like, when you squint your eyes and think about all the applications, knowing what you know about how good this can animate and how realistic it can be, what does the future look like? Can you imagine having conversations, sales conversations with people, having deeper relational conversations with people? Like, where does this go?
So we always try to stay away from the relational part, because that can only go south. People are just weird, and usually that never ends good. However, I have to say, I'm working on these characters now for a while, and specifically Zoe now for 2-3 years or so. Really, time goes by. And for testing, you anyway talk to this character all the time. And with the language models becoming better and better, like ChatGPT, for example, we plug it often in there to see how does it work. And so you tend to go into real kind of interesting conversations, not too personal or so, but for example, use this from time to time now. For example, I have the question, hey, quantum physics, what is that about? And then she gives you a really nice, elaborate answer, not too long. And then you do, okay, but is it like this and this? And suddenly you have a conversation going there that is really nice. And stuff like this works really very well.
So I'll link in the show notes to images of what Zoe looks like. But for the folks that are listening on podcasts, can you describe Zoe? That avatar gets written a lot about in the press. But yeah, just from your point of view, can you describe a little bit about that character?
Yeah, when we started with this, I always have to go back there because we started around 2019. And at the time, there was not even a chance to do anything video-based or so. So we just wanted to have a CG model that is moving correctly. And then actually we figured, why don't we try to do a real-time deepfake on top? We never say deepfake, and I didn't say it now, because it is just a negative connotation. And we use our own tool set. It's named Charlatan, which has a lot of more special sauce in it that makes it more efficient and really tailor-made for us. And we use that for feature, but we also use it. We have a version for it for real time. And what we do is we have an Unreal render actually of the character that has a fairly nice facial rig, also at a time created and developed before even MetaHuman was on the plate. So that is a very efficient, very high detailed facial rig that is just rendering the face, but then this is being replaced and composited with a neural render from our Charlatan system. And therefore the face looks very nice and real, but you can clearly tell when you look at it, that's not a real human. It is a computer graphic, but it's a very lifelike computer graphic. It is very likable.
And now, before we dive deeper, I want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about one of our podcast partners. As a listener of this show, I know you're trying to stay on top of all things AI and tech, which is why you have to check out the amazing GeekWire podcast, produced by GeekWire and hosted by Todd Bishop. It's a treasure of insights featuring industry leaders and the latest tech trends that are shaping our world. It's the perfect companion podcast to Shift AI. GeekWire podcast is where technology meets curiosity and covers the world of technology, startups, and geek culture. Expand your tech horizons and join the conversation. Tune into the GeekWire podcast today, a perfect complement to our own discussions here. Don't miss out. Follow the GeekWire podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Before we go further with the interview, I want to tell you about one of our podcast sponsors, Augmented AI Labs, and how they're transforming businesses through intelligent AI solutions. Augmented AI Labs specializes in helping organizations unlock their potential with Gen AI, starting with your most valuable asset, your business knowledge. Their comprehensive process begins by identifying critical workflow challenges and knowledge needs, then building custom solutions that make your company's expertise instantly accessible. The Augmented AI Labs team combines fine-tuning and retrieval methods to ensure your AI solutions truly understand your business context. They thoroughly test and validate each solution, ensuring it delivers measurable value before creating a detailed technical blueprint for deployment. The real beauty of partnering with Augmented AI Labs is that they don't just stop at strategy. They build, deploy, and manage these solutions for you, continuously improving your knowledge systems while you focus on what you do best. If you're ready to transform how your organization leverages AI and knowledge, visit augmentedAIlabs.com and click on the Contact Us button. That's augmentedAIlabs.com. Now back to the episode. So as you think about different applications for this, what kind of applications, come to mind? How are you going to use, especially the autonomous virtual humans? Like, how is this going to show up for you guys? I know probably it'll show up in film first, but how will that show up? What are the use cases?
In film, we are not using stuff like this. We need to have control in film production. And by the way, that is something that makes AI tools always a little bit tricky because you are a little bit relying on the controllability. So with the years, those things become more controllable. So we will use it more and more in feature production. But an autonomous character is just doing its own stuff. And you don't need this form. You can't go in there and say, hey, can you play it a little bit more like this? Sure, you can try to prompt something also, but it is not really like an actor or like someone you really want to have control over. So that is not used for that. There are more other use cases. For example, what I said before, when I talk to her and ask about certain things, that's almost like an assistant mode. You can just exactly. You can extend this to plug it into some APIs so it can actually take schedules for you in your calendar. We haven't done this yet, but I mean, it's just coding. You just say, it's like Siri. You tell, put it into my calendar, or hey, can you maybe make a phone call? You could go even crazy with those things, and just keep it more personal, because it isn't autonomous. It's not just a voice. It's not just some text. It is somewhat a personification of some kind of computer interface that is just very nice to interact with. So that is one part. Then you could think of tutoring someone. Imagine a teacher that never gets tired with you, not understanding what they mean. And it's actually quite nice that they repeat it again, they repeat it differently again and again differently. Could be in math, could be history. There are all kinds of fields where you can use this. You could, for example, use a historic personality showing you something in a museum and just leading you through the museum and to be, see, this is when I painted this, this and this happened. And so it's kind of a fun little application. Possibly you could do, which this probably would be part of, but more bespoke representations of specific people, of celebrities in certain conventions, or maybe upselling in a store, and having them there. And it's all much more personal than just a commercial on TV. It's something that could be in a kiosk you talk to and that reacts on you and reads your face. We have also a vision system that is actually looking at you and trying to memorize you and all these things. We are only using it so much, but in future, those systems can, because they're not that good, in the future, they can become much better and maybe actually be able to read something like irony from your face, which they really don't right now. And so the future is very open with this, and the possibilities are almost endless, where you use it. But one point that I think is always very appealing to me is, maybe because I'm slowly getting old, but think of companionship in a different way. So not really on a romantic level, but more on when you are fairly lonely. And there are many lonely old people, actually, because the families say they will visit them, but they will not. And suddenly there is maybe something you can talk to that feels human, like it has the human touch, and you're not getting completely crazy by yourself.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that can come into play for a lot of different scenarios. The education and the loneliness one, I think, are really very interesting. They sound a little weird to people now and kind of creepy, but I I think they might do some good for a lot of people in the future. So I really do. I'm glad you brought that up. I want to shift gears a little bit. I've been working closely with AILA and the folks over what they call Silicon Beach. And a lot of the people that are involved in that community are very, very deep into VFX and visual effects. And I know there's a lot of great AI tools that are showing up right now that are helping out that community. So I didn't want to leave the interview without asking you some questions about VFX, because I know that is a big part of your experience. So can you just talk about that? I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff that's happening in the last year and a half.
There is. We always, when you are working in high-end visual effects houses, we have to be always very, very careful what we can use and what should be used. And in particular, with clients like Marvel and so and Disney, it's kind of the same. But there are certain restrictions. You can't just willy-nilly take any kind of model and use it or the training material and then, I create this visual. It looks really great. And then 2 years later, someone's, this one was trained on material that was not actually licensed. And then you're getting into deep, deep trouble. So we have to be very, very selective about what we are doing and how we are doing it. So the way how we approach it is we are testing first now. We have a little unit there, an AI rapid prototyping unit at DD that is really testing out these tools and seeing what could be useful, what not. If this one looks useful, can we create it in a legal way so we can actually use it? Can we create our own training material? Is there training material out there that is licensed and where the source is clear and the origin? And then we can actually use it. I already mentioned before, we use machine learning for a while now, own trained systems for facial animation and for facial tracking. We are looking into more motion capture solutions based on machine learning. We are looking and actually doing already quite some cloth simulation. Used to be simulation. Now it's simulation of cloth simulation. It's machine learned representation of cloth that looks simulated. I guess this is how you would have to say it, which is based on, you simulate it first in all kinds of ways and let the system learn how this particular fabric, for example, is deforming. And once it learned it, you can reuse it. Possibly, it depends on what exactly it is. And we have used it already in certain productions. And that's obviously in-house trained and in-house created and can save a lot of time and rendering and simulation.
I mean, in your world, the amount of time that animators spend doing things and the possibility for automation, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling to think about how much time can be saved with the right tool.
Yeah, on the animation side, we are looking also into different tools and different procedures, or rather. Then, for example, there are these different ways of animating where you go from key pose to key pose. It would be nice, obviously, to have a push button solution where you have key poses now, do everything in between. And there are approaches, and I wouldn't say solutions, that is a little bit much said, but there is software that is trying to do this. We are making our own software for doing this as well. And the results are not that bad. They are certainly not perfect, but they're not that bad, and they already save time with what they produce right now. Or you have situations where again, this guy is running there, then jumping over this thing, then rolling over, then he's ducking there, and this is an action scene. I have to do this with 5 guys. And in that shot, let's prompt it and see what comes out. Maybe it's a good starting point. It will go more and more into this direction. It will hardly ever produce final results if it's not in the far, far background. But it will save quite some time.
What do you think about all these text to video prompting tools? I know right now they seem to be kind of generating pretty short videos, but man, I've been impressed with kind of what I've seen, and I can imagine doing commercials and having a few of those little 5-second shots be AI generated. What do you think about the quality?
Oh, the quality is great. It is, I think, not always, obviously. So there are some really great examples that look really cool. And then there are some, nice try. It clearly goes into this direction that productions will use this more and more and will just get used to the fact that you can produce final looking images with prompting. It will change the way how directors are working, probably, and it will change the way how productions are being approached, probably. what we need to understand, I think people working with this understand this very quickly. These images are great, but if you ask for, oh, that's cool, can you change this little thing here in the background? Then it becomes a little bit more complicated. And doesn't mean there's not a solution for it sooner or later. So someone will come up with something, and they do already to some degree, oh yeah, mask it out and just get this part a little bit different. It's just easier said than actually done. And final YouTube videos are always more glossy and shiny than the actual process is in the end.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I always like to ask on the show about people that have helped folks along the way, mentors. And in your career, can you talk about some of the people that really helped you along the way?
Well, who really helped me along the way was my professor, Thomas Hegele in Ludwigsburg, because he helped me in a way around that he just believed into the things we could do there. And he often asked for strange new things that no one thought about in computer graphics, and said, hey, Matthias, why don't you try this? And I wouldn't know how. I don't even know. This is way too difficult. And so, you can do it. And then just this kind of approach brought me into testing out certain things and losing the fear of trying something that no one has tried before, and figuring out, oh, actually, yeah, you can do much more than you would think. So that was really quite something. Then there was not really the long-term mentor for me through my career, but there were these small incidents where, for example, I like to learn, how do I write my own scripts so I can make Maya a little bit more my slave, so I can get my animation tools that I want, not the ones that exist. And yeah, there were people sometimes at Digital Domain in particular that were just sitting close by, TDs that are, no, you write it like this, and then everything. Is it like this? No, you better do it like this and this. And then they were also open to just teach you stuff that is not in your field, really. Now I often code my stuff. And now I less code myself because I have ChatGPT and tell it, hey, code this and this for me. And and then at some point, I have to admit, Mark Sager, he not directly tutored me, but when I saw his baby many years ago, 2015, or when I saw that, his attempt in doing something with machine learned, simulating life, if you want, and reaction of humans, that sparked in me to try this in Unreal, actually, and creating reactive characters that feel much more real and alive than game characters or anything. This was really something that inspired me. It was not really a mentor, but an inspiration really to go into that direction.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I always like to end the show with the same question. And that is, if you could describe the future of your work in 2 words, and then you can elaborate on those 2 words. But as you think about the future of media, the future of Hollywood in relation to AI, what are the 2 words that you would use to describe that?
Oh, exciting variations.
Excited variations. Okay, tell me more.
It looks like with all the tools coming out now, and we have to say AI means actually just more elaborate tools for producing any kind of stuff. It's not only in our industry, in every industry. With these tools coming out, the amount of products, be movies or anything else, will exponentially rise. I mean, the way how easy it is to create more complex things nowadays, and in a few years, even more and more, is just amazing. So we will see a lot of variations there of very similar things probably coming up. I wonder, though, at which point we are plateauing a little bit, because everybody is now leaning so much into these new tools, and this will not go away. It will become more and more mainstream, and then people will just get very used to working that style with prompting, with using something a little bit around the corner, not so direct, and I move a mouse. No, I just tell it, oh, make a chair, and then there's a chair. The more people get into use of that, they are more relying on what the systems are actually trained on. And if the system is only trained on a certain amount of data, then this is the amount of data it is based on. It's not coming up with really new stuff. It's only making variations of that, unless someone is changing that paradigm. But this is actually not the case right now. And therefore, the next few years, there will be a lot of cool stuff. And then there might be a phase of a little bit plateauing until people find out, okay, how can we be even more generative? Because generative is only so much generative,
That makes sense. Well, Matthias, I really, really learned a lot today. I appreciate having you on the show. I think this is exciting, and I think there's going to be a lot of interesting developments in the future, and I would love to have you back. So thank you again for being on the Shift AI podcast.
Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Such a pleasure to have Matthias as our guest on today's episode. His insights into autonomous virtual humans, AI-powered visual effects, and the future of digital entertainment gives us a glimpse into where this technology is headed. From the development of AI avatars to the challenges of creating truly interactive digital humans, we've seen how AI is revolutionizing not just film production, but potentially education, companionship, and human interaction. If you want to learn more about Digital Domain's innovative work in AI and visual effects, you can follow their development online and stay tuned for their upcoming projects. I continue to be amazed by the guests we've had on the show, and I'm excited about the ones joining us in the near future. I truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for listening to this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the Shift AI podcast for more exciting interviews and to the Augmented Edge newsletter for updates on how AI can help you scale your business. The Shift AI podcast is syndicated by GeekWire, and we're grateful to have the show sponsored by Augmented AI Labs. Our theme music was created by Dave Angel.